Awesome. Awesome. It's good to have you here, Glenn. So, for our audience, Glenn is a financial advisor who has recently invested in Savvly. Personally, I want to just, honor you, Glenn. Glenn operates, in my experience, at a higher complexity of thinking than most people. His ability to go for optimization rather than, going with, rules and heuristics that may or may not make sense in a given situation. To me, it leads to a higher quality of financial advising. And so I do just want to honor Glenn before we get started.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that.
Awesome. So Glenn, let's start off with the big question. Why did you invest in Savvly?
Well, the simple answer is Savvly solves a big problem that exists in almost every country of the world these days for people who are retiring and aging. The biggest worry for wealthy people, people with between 1 million and even 10 million or even more than that, people say their biggest fear is running out of money, living too long.
People with more than $10 million are concerned about running out of money? Wow.
You want to understand it real quick? I don't want to get in too deep, but
go ahead.
So behaviorally, we have a tendency to work with people and befriend people who have similar incomes in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And we all have a propensity to enjoy that lifestyle. And so no matter what income you are, to maintain a happy life with your peers and friends and family that are like you spend like them. And so what happens is we all enjoy life, and we really don't think about what retirement would look like 25 years later, that maybe we enjoyed a little too much. So we have a common problem no matter how much money we make.
Interesting. So then the real challenge then comes from, do you live longer than your peers? And then you end up in that position of, you've been spending like them, they've passed on, you are now broke, what do you do, kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's where you're coming back to your question. Why did I choose to invest in Savvly and recommend it to my clients? Because by pooling resources, which is what Savvly does quite remarkably efficiently, we can all as a group guarantee a better outcome together. There's more power in us pooling our resources than trying to do it all ourselves, because we don't have the resources. So by pooling, if you happen to be the fortunate person who stays in good health and lives a very long time, others may not have, and they didn't need that extra benefit, whereas somebody who lives longer did. So it really works quite well.
Yeah, I like to use the analogy, like, just to simplify it for people. Let's say you've got two people, right? And you've got one person who they on average, they say, hey, I'm going to need $5 million to retire on average, right? But the thing is, that's an average, because one of them needs 3 and one of them needs 7, right? So they can either both work until they have $7 million, in which case one person worked a lot longer than they had to, right? Or was a lot more frugal than they had to be, right? Or they can work less, in which case one of them runs out of money and ends up, on subsistence, and pooling solves that problem, because at a large scale, the averages play out.
Exactly. And let's move a little forward, because this isn't just simply the numbers that you talked about, Sean. This is how we feel and behave in our precious years of retirement. So somebody who retires, and let me use some numbers. Let's say they figured there's a 20% chance that they would reach age 90. So then their financial advisor, our planner, does what I do. They run some Monte Carlo simulations with different markets. And let's say you said, well, there's a 20% chance you'd run out of money. So that's not a 40% chance, by the way. It's 20% times 20%, which is 4%. So what you have is a small problem that creates a lot of worry and removes a lot of confidence and enjoyment from enjoying your early years and spending money and doing the things you want to do, because you're worried about the markets and whether you're going to have enough money. And that's a big drag on one's enjoyment of their retirement. So if one could take a small amount of money and buy into a pool where they were protected, then they, instead of worrying about things, they're now positively incentivized to take good care of their health because they know that they'll have the money later. So it actually makes a bigger difference than even the numbers that you shared would suggest.
Sure, sure. Because it's an asymmetric tail risk kind of thing. It's the same reason, like your house, if your house is going to burn down, kind of thing. It's not a high probability, but
Mhm.
you want to have insurance to make sure that doesn't happen. Because if it happens and you don't have insurance, well, like that's just horrible.
That's a fantastic example because I don't know any wealthy person who wouldn't have insurance for their house because that's a big asset. And if you can insure some of your longevity risk, why not? It's and Savvly is uh, my first discovery because I've been looking for a company that did what your company's doing for about 2 decades because I always saw this as being a continual problem that didn't have a great answer. And so when I discovered your company, I felt like, well, here's the answer that I've been waiting so long for.
Appreciate that, certainly. So, but it's interesting. You talk about, you've been looking and you've been looking and you've been looking. What are the other solutions in the market? And in your mind, what are the challenges with those, or why would you say that Savvy can, in certain situations, be a better fit?
That's an interesting question. So first of all, in many other countries, there are good solutions in the form of tontines, or some sort of a government guarantee, which would be similar to our Social Security system. And in our country, we do have Social Security, which is one of the best start of the solutions. And if somebody were to delay their benefit and get a higher benefit for longer, that would help solve the problem. But most of us know that Social Security is not enough for us to live on. So we need something else. For years, and you see this on the commercials on TV, the insurance companies say that they're going to help us retire safely. And while that's true, because it is safe, the payouts over a long retirement without inflation and with high taxations, which is what their products offer, really don't solve the problem as much as they may even make it worse over time. So it's a feel-good solution, but it isn't going to work. So finding a solution that works and let me go into another point if you don't mind, Sean. One other thing that most wealthy people want to do is make sure that they're able to not be a burden to their children, which is what your solution offers. They also would like to leave something friendly to their estate that isn't heavily taxed that the kids can enjoy. And insurance solutions are very, very bad at that, if they even could do that. Whereas the solution you offer is very friendly. So it creates certainly a better feeling for an aging person who starts needing a little bit more care and love later on to know that they're being taken care of, but they still are taking care of their children and grandchildren as well.
Yeah, yeah. Just to highlight that point, every insurance option I've seen, every annuity I've seen, at some point the beneficiary payout hits zero, and sometimes it's sooner, and sometimes it's later, depending on what riders and the structure and the this and the that and the other thing.
Mhm.
Whereas with Savvy, once you hit your payout age, you get paid, and then you can do whatever you want with that. You can use that money, you can leave it to your children. Remember, if you do, disclaimer, this is not tax advice, but if you do receive the shares that we pay out and you leave the shares directly to your children, you can actually step up the basis and pay the capital gains.
Mm-hmm.
So that I certainly get what you're saying there on the beneficiary protection. And it's almost like, if somebody has enough money that they know they're not going to run out of money, they may still be worried about passing that longevity risk on to the estate. Because
Mm-hmm.
then, like, I've done modeling where sometimes the estate gets 10 million and sometimes it gets 2 million, depending on how long grandpa lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, this is something that can help mitigate that as well.
Exactly. And remember that there's a certain amount of humanness to this equation because in the case with the way you're structured things at Savvy, somebody can choose, I'm going to get this payout. And then they can choose whether or not they're going to capitalize on that money, or maybe they don't need it yet and they're going to let it grow some more. They get to make a choice.
Sure.
Any insurance contract that choice is only one time and it's inflexible. So
Mm,
you get the money the way that they have signed your contract, whether you need it, whether you want it. And oftentimes what happens is life is kind of lumpy, where we have some really good years and some really bad years later in life. And so we need more kindness and flexibility. We wouldn't want to call an 800 number and find out that, no, your contract says you can't do that, because that is a harsh reality to many of the financial solutions in the insurance world.
sure, sure. Yeah, you have one thing. Hey, I choose my annuitization, and that is then everything shifts, and that's that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Whereas with Savvy, you can extend as long as it's for a minimum of 5 years. Just
Mm-hmm.
one reason why I'm a big fan of like choosing multiple payouts like 1 year apart and for 5 of them and then just extending. Right. I call it a Savvy ladder, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
a useful strategy there.
Mm-hmm.
People can have some trouble choosing payout dates. That's why we have like the default multiple payout option that kind of spreads it out over time, in case people don't know exactly what they want to do for their payout age. And I'm sure with you and your clients, you probably plan it more precisely.
It's what they pay me for, Sean.
Because you know exactly when they're going to need money and all of these other things, right?
Yes, yes, because in a financial goal plan, we've identified what goals when, what travel, what car purchases, and what expectations, maybe a 50th anniversary. So we know where the big lumpy spending is. So we are going to try to make sure that those goals are funded as efficiently as possible and the money's available and it gets the least amount of taxes. So we're going to try to be more precise, because again, that's the service that I offer clients. But I think, and on a simplistic note, is most people know kind of what they're expecting to do or hoping to do. And even if they just made some simple choices, your program offers enough flexibility that they're going to get it at least 90% right, even without a professional advisor helping them.
Yeah, exactly. So like, yeah, if we do the especially because of the multiple payout option gives them like diversification over time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's our default. And then if you
Mm-hmm.
want to do, some fancy engineering with like a Savvy ladder, or you want to pick
Yeah.
specific ages based on your financial plan or something, then if you are really Excel oriented and that's your jam, you can do that. And if not, maybe hire someone like you,
Yeah.
a financial advisor, to optimize everything.
Well, just to appreciate that, imagine for a moment our government said, we're going to let everyone choose whatever date they want. There's no rules. They can take their Social Security whenever they want, and you can take your distribution from your IRA whenever you want. There's no rules. See, then there would be more flexibility and more, it'd be liberating to people because they wouldn't be forced to have to do something. So they could do it when they need it and when it was most valued. But obviously the government also has that structure. So this, it's Savvly the program is very well thought out by obviously very intelligent, creative people, so that it is very flexible, very friendly, very efficient, and it removes that big worry from retirees, which should create a much better, enjoyable retirement, because everyone else that you'd be associating with would be worried. But if you knew that you had some longevity protection, you might be having the best time on the beach in Hawaii one day.
Yeah, I mean, for context for the audience, right? Like, if you take somebody who invests, you only need to put in, 5 or 10% of your portfolio, right? And since we market track with S&P, I normally recommend to people you take money that would be in S&P anyway. That way,
Mm-hmm.
you're not worried about like the market risk of the S&P, because you'd be in that. Just take that slug anyway. We're just layering a multiplier on top,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you take like a 50-year-old man who gets a payout at age 84 or 85, he's looking at more than double his, not just his gains, but also his principal as well, like the whole thing, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
if that 100,000 would be 500,000 just with index funds, with Savvy it would be 1 million, right? There's that 2x multiplier, and then it kind of goes up exponentially from there, because the proportion of people who are going to live to be 90 is a lot lower than the proportion of people who are going to live to be 80. And it goes up, it goes up and up to a maximum of 6, because we don't want to have someone who's 120 something take the whole pool. But if you're getting 6 times what you would get with index funds alone, you can chalk that up as a win on that investment.
And the main thing is it solves that issue for that person who now gets into their 80s and is in very good health and starts worrying, maybe I need to cut my spending because I'm worried that I might overspend and I might end up poor. So it relieves that worry, because those bigger payouts are going to fund that longevity very efficiently. So it does do that. It does. That's what I think is the best part of your program is not just the numbers and the money, but the fact that people have their biggest worry in retirement removed, pretty much.
So just, you've used that word efficiently a lot, and I love efficiency, right? I'm an engineer by training and study. So I'm all for efficiency. What are the aspects that you believe drive that efficiency? So like, if you look at Savvly, where do you see the efficiency gains coming from?
Well, first of all, it's a low cost solution.
Mm-hmm.
So by nature, a high cost solution is inefficient because you're paying for something that you're not getting. So it's a low cost solution. It's very tax friendly, so the money can really grow exponentially without getting drugged down. It's being in the market. It's likely over a long period of time to get the biggest gain, and we're going to make a commitment to leave it there. And that by itself is efficient because it's sticky and it will work over time. So that's efficient. And what else? And then obviously what you mentioned, you're not wanting to take more risk. You're basically taking the risk you're already taking, like in the S&P 500, and just transferring it over to your program. So you're not taking more risk to achieve those better results. And then of course there's the efficiency with the estate matters, that when somebody gets a big payout later in their shares, if they didn't need that, they could just let those shares keep appreciating, and then it could transfer tax-free to their loved ones. So that's a real solid, efficient program.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you hit pretty much all of the points that were engineered, right? So again, this just shows, as I said, your ability to analyze things from a higher level of complexity very quickly. It's something it's one of the reasons why I love chatting with you, because it's just, we'll talk offline on other things. And I've really appreciated your intellect and your insight. So yeah, I'd agree with all of that. As a matter of fact, when I first started doing some freelance work for Savvly, and Dario described it to me, my first thought is like, wait a minute, this is mathematically the most efficient way to possibly handle this particular risk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because, I think one of the reasons why, annuities tend to have higher fees, right? Because, they're on average about like 10x what the Savvly fees are. I think one of the reasons why they do that, and why they have to do that, is because they're directly bearing the market risk, right? So there's this market risk component that they now have to, they have to have their capital, and they have to set aside a lot more capital to get the same result than we do with this approach. And at the end of the day, right, what we're really trying to do is hedge a particular risk, which is longevity risk, and trying to attack multiple risks at the same time with the same thing, I think leads to a potentially suboptimal approach, right? Because like, you want to attack market risk with a properly diversified portfolio, right? And then you just put in a little bit of Savvly to handle the longevity risk. And it's kind of like, it pushes that efficient frontier out a little bit, right? Because you have a new tool where you can diversify in a new way and create new combinations.
So let me agree with you, and let me just add something. So it costs a fortune to provide a guarantee, and so that's what drags down the returns. And so insurance companies feel that most of the people that they're prospecting are willing to make that expensive purchase in favor of getting a guarantee. But the guarantee comes with a massive risk. So we we got rid of the market risk because we paid for that, but now we inherit inflation risk and longevity risk. Because even though they might guarantee a payout for life, in 30 years, that value is easily 50, 60, 80% compromised. And the market would never do that to you, at least in my opinion, over that period of time, or any period. It'd be rare when you have any kind of volatility, maybe a 2008 or another event. But remember, the markets bounce back, but that would be a permanent destruction of wealth that is the risk that we're trying to avoid in the market. And now we're willing to pay to acquire that risk being out of the market for a fractional guarantee over time. So investors are often fooled because they think about the present value of things more than the future value. But in real terms, real meaning net of inflation, our retirement is safe when we protect real value.
Yeah. And I think that, you hit an interesting point there, that if somebody's goal is to remove all possible risks and get to a point of completely zero risk, there is no way to actually do that, right? There is, I mean, you could have your money in a bank, but then, like, a bank can fail. You can put the cash under your mattress, but then, there's the cost of security. Like, there's never a way to eliminate entirely all risk from life in any form. But what you can do is manage those risks in a way where you get them to be, as negligible as possible, which sometimes involves being willing to kind of step beyond any individual risk and see the portfolio comprehensively from a whole and how it's going to respond from a whole.
Yeah. So in professional circles, those of us who do more academic work, including myself, we see everything as probabilities. Nothing's 100%, but we could try to get as close to 90 or maybe even 95 as possible. But there's always these things that have to be accepted, much like the biggest risk that all of us take every day. We go out in our car to go to the store. You could die, but you have to take that risk because you have to get some food. So that's a risk that we understand and we manage because we put our seatbelt on, et cetera. And so similarly, we need to understand and manage probabilities. And we don't get a guarantee when we put the seatbelt on that we're going to live. We just get a better probability. And that's what we're talking about, finding the right security that gives us that higher probability of success.
Yep. I love that. I love that analogy because I think about that all the time. Like, if I ever see, if somebody's ever worried about something, like, well, aren't you scared of A, B, and C? Like, I just do a quick check in my head. Is it more dangerous than driving a car? If the answer is no, I don't spend 1 second thinking about it. Right? Like, I've decided that's an acceptable level of risk, and I want to be logically consistent. That is interesting. And then I think that's why where it comes down to, there was, I can't remember who said this quote, but they said that that the biggest risk is not taking any action because it guarantees failure, right? And so that's where you have to look at what's the gain, what's the deviation from the gain. And that's why we have these sophisticated programs that will model out what's your exact percentage chance of running out of money, not what's your estimate or what you think or the emotion around one thing or the other thing. It's like, when you put all this together, what's your chance? And I think that's where taking something where you have a new tool like Savvly to say, hey, listen, all the cases where you run out of money or where you live to be 95 or older, okay, great, let's put a little bit of money into this, and then we just take that off the table, and then it can go from 92% to 99% success rate.
Exactly. You sound like you do the safety guy do a lot because that's ultimately what we're all trying to do is provide more probabilities of success to people who work so hard to enjoy a great lifestyle in retirement, and they don't want to go back to work, and they don't want to downsize their lifestyle or move out of their beautiful home. And so if there's a small chance that could be compromised late in life for a small amount of money, you pull your money together with others with the same risk, and then everybody has a happy ending and a good experience getting there.
Yep, that's what it's all about. Thank you for distilling that. This has been great so far. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Glenn?
Well, I could add that in my my personal searching, I did find there was a company before I found you folks. I found that there was a company who through a, a citizen who's one of the leading academics in annuitization in Canada, trying to help people there with the same problem. Moshe Malevsky is his name, and he was always a big fan of tontines, and he got the government to sponsor this solution. And I did talk to them, and their solution was good, but it had very limited benefits because of the structure. It was not as well created and thought out. Obviously, with the government involved, there was some trepidation of maybe their concerns or whatever, but it was good, and it was a solution that will work for Canadian citizens quite well. But I think we're really blessed in this country to have probably the best longevity solution in history so far with your firm, Sean. There may be somebody who comes along who maybe one ups you, but yours is pretty spectacular and it will work. And right now, you're kind of the only solution out there that makes really good sense. So I think if anybody's thinking about solving longevity problems right now, that you're a very good choice.
Thank you so much. Yeah, tontines is something we get compared to a lot, you know. I think the two challenges with tontines for financial planning is, one is the increase in income is dependent upon when other people in the tontine die, and you can't know that. Right. So if you're trying to plan out your financial plan, you can't put in particular cash flow numbers because you don't know when Susan's going to die or when Joey's going to die. And I think that makes planning difficult. And the other issue that I see is that the way it's done is that they have to get people within a particular cohort, right, and particular health status and all this kind of stuff to kind of match it. Right. The way we're constructed, we can bring in anybody of any age, any gender, any of that, because we have actuarial algorithms that adjust for all that.
Yes.
Which makes it more scalable, which gets us to a larger pool, which means that there's an infinitesimal risk of deviation from the tables.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It certainly is a big improvement, and you're right. You obviously have modern computers and blockchain technology and other modern things that make a much better, interesting, robust solution than the tontines of old that were basically done without the benefits of modern technology and had some problems. And so it's nice that they're being reintroduced now in a more modern way around the globe. And obviously your formulas were very creative and built in a very friendly way for your.
They weren't mine. I didn't come up with the formula.
I know, well, your firm, but they're certainly done well, and I always have the highest standards in my practice for everything, and it's hard for me to meet that, let alone someone else. But your firm has definitely met and exceeded my expectations, and it's a beautiful thing that should be a great solution for many people.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate it. We'll chat soon, and thanks for coming on to talk.
Okay, thank you for giving me the privilege.
Cheers, everyone.